First off, thank everybody for attending and your interest, obviously, in uranium. It's quite a good topic. John made my talk about 8 minutes because he covered a bunch of what I was going to say, but it's a great time to be there. I'm executive chairman of enCore Energy, and we're the newest producer on the block, having just commissioned our Rosita in situ plant back in November and having the grand opening here about a month ago. I will be making some forward-looking statements, if I can make this work.
Big green button, yeah.
Title's still up there, though. Any ideas?
Oh, I see something moving in the background.
Well, this will fill the extra time.
That's interesting. Okay,
there we go. Perfect.
Okay. Excellent.
Thank you. And that is a drum of our yellow cake, not a stock photo, so we are actually producing it. Just a little bit of background, we are 100% dedicated to in situ recovery of uranium in the United States. The United States is the world's largest consumer, and it will remain so through this decade, maybe eclipsed by China later on, but for the next half a dozen years or so, it'll certainly retain its dominance. Of that, very small percentage of it, of our use is produced domestically. There's a huge market for it. A little over half of the uranium coming into the U.S., and especially in the enriched products, and comes through the port of St. Petersburg, which, although Mr. Putin doesn't produce that much of it, he certainly controls our access to a great deal of it. And that's evidenced. The criticality, that's pretty obvious, but when you start looking at some of the acts in front of Congress or legislation in front of Congress talking about banning any Russian imports, it becomes potentially very critical. The current bills in front of the Congress are talking about a 5-year workout period where companies can get exceptions and still deal with Russia. But there's probably a pretty good chance Mr. Putin, when presented with this, will say, you know, it's a great idea, why don't we start tomorrow? Which would cause severe repercussions in the industry. I will be making some forward-looking statements. And this just illustrates what I talked about briefly. You know, the U.S. was self-sufficient as recently as 1980, so we have the resources, we have the ability, and as you can see, after the Cold War came to an end, or at least a pause, we became heavily reliant upon foreign imports, about half of which are from Canada and Australia, and the rest are from less friendly options. And you can see the U.S. supply just fell off the chart on the graph on the left. So, you know, we're producing, I think, a couple 100,000 pounds last year. This year, it'll be under 1 million for the year, it looks like, even with the new producers, but somewhere in that vicinity. Still a far cry from the 50 that we need. And here again, we do have the ability to get there. It'll take a number of years. As John pointed out, nothing's quick in this industry. You know, we were very fortunate to get a plant that was built already, and one of two, and we're able to work on it when prices were a little bit lower. So we got a bit of a head start on that as well. You can see our entire growth plans are based in Texas for the first 3 years. We have 3 of the 11 licensed plants, all in Texas, South Texas. Rosita production started, as I mentioned. The Rosita plant has an 800,000 pound a year capacity. The Altim Mesa plant, which is the bigger one, and more importantly, comes with 80,000 hectares or 200,000 acres of mineral rights with it. That'll come on production sometime in the second quarter, probably late April, May, somewhere in that time frame. And it's a good time to mention that enCore is focused strictly on production. We'll do a bit of exploration, head frame, if you will, even though it's not really mining in the conventional sense. But on the properties, we'll do a bit of exploration, drill out well fields as we move forward. But we don't want to take the risk of exploration as per se. So we've developed a staff, very deep staff, deep bench strength that is quite adequate to run a couple of plants, we think. We still got a few positions we're filling, but we're staffed up, over 100 employees now. And we look just to take projects and put them into production. I already mentioned the 100% in situ, just talked about our operational team. We have a balanced sales approach, which in an idealized market would be about 50% spot, 50% contract. Realistically, there's going to be a lot more contracts that have spot elements to them, That is where you have collars or floor and a ceiling around a spot price. And that would comprise about half of our contract book at the moment. The other half being spot related. And we have a very good non-core asset program whereby we've got a large number of assets, primarily in the conventional uranium mining type of thing, not in situ. And we look to monetize those over the last 3 years. We've been very successful, having brought in about $30 million to the balance sheet in terms of sales of those non-core assets. And that'll continue to be a helping hand with the company. You can see our market cap is right at 700 million US. You can see the shares there. The important factor here is the cash being a bit over $70 million. This gives effect to a joint venture on the Altim Mesa project that I just mentioned being our next one to come into production. We recently concluded or closed the transaction whereby Boss Energy of Australia, one of the leading companies in Australia, has come in for a 30% equity participation in the Altim Mesa project. And that has been a transformational effect on the company. We've gone from, 8 months ago, we had 60 million in debt. We had 5 or 6 million in the bank and nothing in terms of revenue. And we've transformed that into zero debt, 70-some million dollars of cash on the books, revenue coming in, and significantly more revenue coming in when Altim Mesa is up and running. So it's been a highly transformational time period for us. And a picture here will show you the idea. You've probably heard of satellite plants. The plant that we have, Rosita and Altim Mesa, these are central processing plants, much like the one John talked about at Lost Creek. And we also have the ability to bring processed resin that's coated with uranium. This is a satellite plant at Rosita. That is, the well field is not immediately adjacent to the plant. So we set up a series of remote ion exchange columns. The slurry goes into the tanker truck you can see there, and then it's driven to the plant. Current uranium prices, you can probably transport this material hundreds of miles, at least a couple of hundred miles, and still have a very profitable enterprise. What we're doing here is we're trucking it about a couple of miles, so it's far more economic in our instance than laying more trunk lines. As I mentioned, the staff, it starts at the top and goes all the way to the bottom in terms of experienced personnel, most of our staff is a direct result of our CEO, Paul Goranson, who's in the audience here. He's built the last handful of plants out there and operated most of them. At one point or another, put in an awful lot of well fields. I don't think he can count them anymore, but his leadership has really brought us all the credit goes to him and his team for getting us into production. And I'd also mention that the Rosita project was 20 months from submitting the permit till we were in production. That's in the state of Texas, which is a real advantage being in an agreement state. Agreement state simply means you don't deal with the Nuclear Regulatory Commission, you deal with the state government. And so in terms of in situ, you want to be in Wyoming or Texas, huge advantages. Dr. Stover, I'm not going to read all these to you, but Dr. Stover was one of the initial inventors of the process of in situ recovery. He's our chief technical officer. And Peter Luthiger is Paul's right-hand man. He's the guy in the field, the chief operations officer, so day-to-day making it happen. Essentially, everybody on the board's got 35, 40 years experience in the business, and that filters all the way down, like I say, to our supervisory levels in the field. I won't dwell on this. Most of you know the fuel cycle, but point out that utilities do contract each element of this separately. Our involvement with it ends at the production of yellow cake and shipping it to the conversion facility in Metropolis, Illinois. Then it goes through the conversion process into a separate enrichment process. And that's the real bottleneck in terms of the Western world supply is the conversion and enrichment, especially in terms of the U.S. ability to do so. That ends up going into fabrication, where they make little fuel pellets and fuel rods. And one little fuel pellet about the size of, I think I've got one in my pocket here. Not a real one, don't worry. But this little pellet has the same energy as a ton of coal. So you can imagine the density of the energy in it. And it's the main reason that nuclear is the foundation of our electrical energy needs going forward. And then that goes to the nuclear power plant. We have a production goal at enCore of 3 million pound a year production rate. That's what we're looking at in 3 years, such that in 2027, thank you. Obviously been talking too much. In 2027, we plan to be up to that 3-year run rate, or 3 million pound a year run rate. And a similar goal would be 5 million pounds within 5 years. And that's the run rate, so that the 6th year would be the first year at full 5 million pound a year production. Now, this goal is predicated and built around the strategy in Texas. All the first 3 years are in Texas. And you can see there the darker colored lines are what we'd originally envisioned as our production goals. The earlier mentioned joint venture with Boss is responsible for the hatched areas. We've been pretty big activists in terms of M&A over the years of building this company. And we've always said that we're interested in it if it brings us more pounds or more pounds sooner. That is, increases our production. And clearly the Boss financing, putting the $70 million into the Treasury, enabled us to advance all of these projects you see with the hatch. And instead of having to go linear one project after another, especially on these satellite ones, we're able to advance more of them at once and get that production up to capacity much sooner. The South Dakota and Wyoming projects, these will involve the building of CapEx, building of new plants, but everything in Texas is, the facility and the capacities are already installed. So we should be able to do those out of cash flow when the time comes. Long term, we have quite a few assets in New Mexico, and I'm going to try and play a short video for you here. I think I didn't do that right. See if it works this time. We're going to skip the video. Too much high tech here. Maybe we'll figure it out at the end. I did not do that. It's got a mind of its own here. Okay. So this is a block model of the in situ process, and it shows you the roll front uranium down at the bottom with the yellow. The injector well is the blue in the middle. The only thing we put in the ground, we pump groundwater out and we fortify it with oxygen. That oxygenated groundwater is then injected through the middle well, or sorry, in this instance it's through the middle well and then it comes out the other ends. You typically have 5-spot arrangement where your center well is the one you produce from, and you inject down the sides. You always produce just about 0.5% more water than you inject, and that keeps a cone of depression at the bottom so you control your fluids, and of course they're uranium-bearing fluids, so that's where your revenue is. Obviously the advantage is to in situ, no surface disturbances to speak of, much quicker permitting. We're not putting anything harmful into the environment. And obviously, the CapEx is only a small fraction of a conventional mine. And then on the reclamation end, it's far superior to conventional mining. And that's why the grades that we get can compete with the best grades in the world in conventional mining. This is a picture of the South Texas mineral belt. You can see the small circles are the various projects that will be contributing satellite feed to the plants that are in orange. The Rosita there in the center of the field is the one that's already in production. Alta Mesa is the very large land package in the southern end. Here again, 80,000 hectares, and the production plant's on the southeast edge of that. The third plant that we have, Kingsville, which is a duplicate of the Rosita plant, is just north of that. But essentially everything here is within a 100-mile radius of Corpus Christi. And that's our operational headquarters, and we get a lot of synergy out of that first 3-year effort of building everything around a central hub, so we aren't running off in 4 or 5 different jurisdictions trying to accomplish it. A lot of economic benefits there as well. Here are the resource numbers on Alta Mesa. We've got about 19 million pounds when you combine all of the categories. Only a small fraction of the known mineralized trends or stacked uranium roll fronts has been drilled out, certainly something under 15% of it. And there's some rules of thumb of what you can expect when you drill a mile of roll front, and they range from 250,000 up to over 1 million pounds a mile. And so we're quite optimistic this is going to be a multi-decade producer based on its past experience, having already produced quite a few pounds and having such a robust inventory left. Looking forward to really ramping this up. In terms of other assets, we have one of the largest databases in the world for uranium data from private operators in the past or public companies, mostly large uranium companies, large oil companies, and a lot of nuclear utilities that had their own mineral exploration subsidiaries. Unlike Canada, where this information is public, it's all proprietary in the States, and if you've got it in your possession, which we do, it pays us dividends for many years to come, and we're still finding assets that were drilled out and known in the 70s and still neglected to this day. So when we see those, even if they don't fit into our production plans, we pick them up and vend them out and make a nice profit on the transaction. So in summary, we've got uranium production that's already underway. As John mentioned, one of 4 or 5 in North America that are currently producing in the public market. We have very good expansion plans. We've got the resources and the facilities to do that, especially the first 3-year goal of 3 million pounds a year. Having all the facilities there is a big head start. Obviously, we think this is just the beginning of the uranium trend. We've had a very exciting time in the markets, but if you look at the public acceptance, the growing demand for nuclear, we're really in its infancy. And it's not to say that every year or every quarter is going to be a great year for investors, but over the long run, I do think you're looking at an enormous opportunity for long-term investment, way above average growth potential. To achieve that, we've got one of the best teams in the business, fully staffed, as I say, for the operation of our first 2 plants, and a clear path to cash flow. We're anticipating turning the corner on that during this year by the 4th quarter. Not saying the 4th quarter will be positive cash flow, but we think we'll turn the corner no later than sometime in the 4th quarter. And that would set us up for a very nice 2025. The other asset sales will just continue to augment the balance sheet. We don't foresee any need for capital raises given our current playing hand. As I say, we do look at mergers and acquisitions. Pretty much keep our eye on the ball all the time, so it's just a matter of pricing and finding the right people and partners and projects at the same time that are a good fit. So not to say that will happen or won't, but we always keep our eyes open on it. And this was a scene from our grand opening held down at the Rosita plant. That's former governor of the state of Texas, Rick Perry, who's also the former energy secretary under Trump. He was our keynote speaker at the event, and a grand time was had by all. I think that's it.